Live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talk Live. Yes, we had some technical issues. We're still working through our new system we have here. So bear with me. Thank you very much for joining me here on Talk Live, live on IJ, YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We are back on Tuesday, as promised, with the Diddy update, ladies and gentlemen. Diddy Trail is still ongoing. The prosecution has not rested its case, and more witnesses are piling up and into the courtroom in New York. So we're going to go and do a Diddy recap for you, and also show you how indeed a RICO case is being built with Diddy with the help of Nate the lawyer. So thank you very much for joining me here on Talk Live, live on IJ, YouTube. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Sponsored by Duntalk, DUNTALK.com, wearing one of my Duntalk favorites here. Yeah, spring summer line out now. Do go and check those out if you can, ladies and gentlemen. Duntalk, DUNTALK.com. But let's get into it right away. We're not going to mince any words. We're going to get into this YouTube here. Thank you very much for joining me here on Talk Live. Oh. That is not what I want to see. Let me get this down here and put this up here. Bang. Yes, indeed. So we are back here, ladies and gentlemen, with, we're going to go with day 23 of Diddy here. This is, this is what happened today, but I think I need to go back a little further to what happened Friday and Saturday. So we're going to recap with that. We're going to end with that. So we're going to go to this here, ladies and gentlemen. And the last couple of days of Diddy, because we missed Friday and we missed Monday. And then we'll go back to TMZ for today. So we are going to, give me 1 second here. I have them itemized and prioritized here. And yes, I believe I think this is it here. This is 4 days ago, yes. So this will be it. Wow. Okay, Diddy. Yes, the Jays are doing, doing the most understandable things, anyways, and he just launched that. Fantastic. I don't know. These Jays are trying my patience. Anyways, let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen, with Diddy. Recap of Friday's issues, and yeah, let's get into it right away. We're gonna whiz through this Friday episode because the one thing that law and crime are so good at is being very thorough in terms of their look at the Diddy case day by day. But the one bad thing about law and crime is that they do a thorough review of the Diddy case day by day, ladies and gentlemen. So again, yes, let me get to my YouTube camera. There we go. And there we are. We're back here. There we go. So I was just looking at that. Okay, so we're back here on the we're on all things. So let's get into this Diddy review. Thank you very much for joining me here on Talk Live, live on IG and YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, as we go.
It's all about alleged victim Jane's testimony today in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Back on the stand, she testified about voyeuristic sex and drugs, audio recordings were played, texts were read. What were the main points of her testimony, though? How does it potentially fit into the prosecution's case? And how was the jury reacting to her? Law and Crime's in-court reporter Elizabeth Milner is back with us to break it all down. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, so you heard me lay it all out there. Jane back on the stand today in Sean Diddy Combs' criminal trial out of New York. Federal court testified about how Combs...
Okay, just a reminder for you. Yes, indeed. The last day where we left off, it was Jane. Jane was the former Diddy, affair and paramour and social media influencer. And again, she was the one who wanted a relationship with Diddy, but Diddy only wanted her for the freak offs and nothing else. So that is who we are yet to. She's yet to finish her direct examination today. I mean, on Friday. So we pick up with that on Friday. She's yet to finish her direct examination, and then she'll have her cross examination thereafter. All right, so let's get into it.
Combs allegedly coerced her into multiple sexual episodes with other men, right? Sex trafficking, transporting sex workers and her for purposes of prostitution, another charge. Maybe fits into racketeering conspiracy, the idea that Combs engaged in a pattern of abuse and sexual exploitation of women using his businesses and resources and staff to essentially create a criminal enterprise that was engaged in all sorts of crimes. So what were the highlights of her testimony? Did she help prove any of these charges? Maybe, I don't know, maybe not the best witness for the prosecution. You know, she claims she was in a relationship with him right until his arrest. So, with all that in mind, I want to bring on Law and Crime's in-court reporter Elizabeth Milner, who is going to give us a play-by-play on the biggest moments that happened today. Elizabeth, it's great to see you. Now, first of all, before we even talk about her testimony, she is testifying under a pseudonym, Jane. That's not her real name. The courtroom sketches are actually blurring her face. But I understand in the middle of court today, it came out that people are trying to find out who she is?
And I think starting back when Mia was testifying, as far as people who have been online trying to figure out who these witnesses are. And in Jane's case specifically, her lawyer went up there and kind of gave an argument to the judge just about YouTube and Instagram accounts that have been either trying to identify Jane or are just flat out just saying her name on the internet. And then Jane's attorney had said that no one in the courtroom did it, but as far as her concern, she seemed very concerned about this as far as people trying to find out who she is, people talking about who she is, and understandably there are kind of identifiable traits inside the transcripts, inside where people might be able to kind of draw the connection, but as far as just the entire judge's order in the first place, the order is that you cannot talk about this particular witness. Now, as far as what the judge can do to kind of ramify maybe the damage that has been done, he's looking into it, and I believe that Jane's defense attorney is going to submit a letter just kind of going more in depth about it. But you always have to kind of wonder to yourself, Jesse, how much can the judge do? For example, if somebody is commenting on it, they live in Ohio or Oklahoma or just some other area that's not in New York City, just how much of a reach can a judge's order really do in this particular case? And I think it's one of the problems that is coming up in a trial this big with this very high profile and just the impact that it could have.
I think the main concern is if somebody in that courtroom is leaking information. That is the number one concern, and hopefully that is not the case. The judge can definitely do something about that. Okay, I want to get back into her testimony. And look, one of the individual charges that Sean Combs faces is sex trafficking with respect to Jane. Force, fraud, coercion. What were some of the examples that you saw that would support, I don't know if necessarily force, but maybe fraud or coercion for the prosecution's case? Because there was a lot of information today, and I actually was trying to pick out pieces that might support the prosecution's case, and then we could talk about maybe some weaknesses. But what were parts that you think support the prosecution's case that this was sex trafficking?
Well, I think as far as the prosecution goes, I think they're really kind of honing in that it's sex trafficking by fraud specifically. So, for example, if Jane is making text messages or sending text messages or writing even voice notes to herself or writing them out in her phone, because we all know we have that iPhone notes app inside our phone, that she's explaining that Diddy, or Sean as she refers to him while on the stand, was a pathological liar, that he would lie to her about things as far as she was under the impression that the two would be just spending time together, and then what would turn out was that they would end up having these hotel nights or debauchery nights or freak off just for not even like an hour or two, not even for 30 minutes, nothing like that. For the lowest, I think, amount she had said was 12 hours, and the longest going for 3.5 days. And so I think the prosecution is really trying to hone in that this wasn't sex trafficking necessarily by force or coercion, but more specifically under fraud. And under one of the arguments that they were making towards the end of the day, they did kind of verify that they believe that this is sex trafficking by fraud. And so there are other examples, too, that could possibly go into maybe force or coercion, that being that Jane had always wanted these escorts, or the entertainers as she calls them while on the witness stand, to wear condoms, and that Diddy didn't necessarily like that. He preferred that these men would just be doing it unprotected in a sense. And there were times where Jane did seem apprehensive about doing these freak-offs or hotel nights or debauchery nights with certain escorts. So there was one time where she said that one man was brought in and that she found him kind of unattractive and was kind of repulsed by him. He was sweating all over over her. She just, again, wasn't attracted to him, and she wanted kind of Diddy to like kick him out, and she didn't want to do this. But instead of him just leaving, I mean, he did end up leaving, but then another man was brought. So it seemed like, I think what they were trying to go for is that even if she didn't want to do it, even if she wasn't attracted to or didn't want to have sex with these particular men or escorts, that instead of just dismissing this person, just ending the night just there, it would just continue on, or he would just get somebody else to do it. She explained that she would cry after hotel night. She said one time she thought that she and Diddy were just doing a date night. This was the beginning of their relationship, and then they did an 18-hour hotel night, and at the end Diddy said that he had to leave, and she said that I just didn't want him to leave me like that, especially after doing this very long sex session, which she also referred to as performances, that she would just be performing because she loved him and that she just wanted to make him happy. And then she gets kind of emotional and chokes up a little bit on the witness stand, where she was like, I didn't want him to leave me like that alone. I was so high that night. It was just a bad memory. And again, she's kind of crying about this while on the stand. And so Jane said that she cried even in front of Diddy at the Waldorf Hotel in Beverly Hills. And Diddy looked at her and was like, are you crying? And Jane explained that this was in a disgusted face that he was making. She said that there was another time where she had cried after a hotel night. She says she was in the shower with Diddy, and she felt herself kind of blacking out. She said that they were at his house. Next thing you know, we were at a hotel. I was high. I embraced his butler. Then I was having sex with Paul, and Paul is an escort. And that Sean, aka Diddy, was telling her to stop crying because he was high and just didn't enjoy that. And so it seemed like from Jane's point of view that she really, kind of similar to Cassie, just continued to do drugs and rarely did these freak off sessions or hotel nights sober. She recalled maybe 2 instances of starting them at least sober, and then because she was just kind of disgusted with herself and disgusted just with the whole process of it, she ended up taking a pill, and that pill likely being an ecstasy pill. And so it seemed like maybe the government does have that kind of working for them as far as going to count 4 specifically of sex trafficking pertaining to victim 2 or Jane. And so it seems like those are kind of the arguments that we've learned so far. We still have a whole nother day of direct, so I'm sure we'll learn a lot more soon.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll let that run a little bit so that we get the full gist of what was being proffered by the prosecution in that case. But again, I think what it comes down to is sex trafficking by fraud. Now, again, is that I guess the prosecution is showing that Jane in this case wanted a relationship with Diddy, wanted to be with Diddy on a romantic level. Diddy would, Diddy did not lay out as much. Sorry, that's pardon the pun there. Well, he did not want as much. He just wanted to have free calls with her. Now, I guess the fraud would be that instead of having one man, she would have multiple men. Instead of a few hours, it would be multiple hours. So I guess the fraud would be there. But the fact of the matter is, she knew. I think what would hurt the prosecution in this case is the fact that she knew indeed what was contained in these freak offs. She would go back again and again and again to entertain herself with these freak offs, with the hopes of proving her love for Diddy. Now, again, Diddy saw her as as the streets would say, a jump off. Diddy saw her simply as sexual gratification, and would indeed move on in that instance. But it'd be very difficult to prove sex by fraud because, again, she would go back, and I didn't hear anything from Diddy, any testimony from Diddy saying that they wanted to build a relationship here. That would be sex. That would be sex by fraud. But in this instance, there wasn't to be said. She just laid out, the tawdry details of her freak offs with Diddy, with using other male prostitutes in order to have sex with her. But it was all towards her proving to be the lady in his life. However, there was a difference between Jane and Cassie, and that Cassie was indeed the lady in Diddy's life, but Jane was not. And again, you could say fraud, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. People get played every day. And unfortunately, it was done in not the best of circumstances, but that's what happened here. So I guess it'd be piling on, but not by much. I don't see this as being really credible, uh, credible testimony here by Jane, simply because she was not forced to do this. There was not a gun held to her head. She went into these things willingly, took the drugs willingly in order to get through these free calls willingly. So again, not the best of things. Now you're starting to see slowly but surely the defense starting to get some sort of grip on this case, some sort of some sort of uh, uh, well, leverage in this case in terms of how things are going, because again it was running a good clean sweep for the prosecution for many a witness. However, I was seeing Brianna Bangalon as being comebacks on behalf of the defense. So we'll see how relevant this matter is, but I do not really see the weight of the testimony here with regards to Jane. Let's continue.
By the way, we plan to continue to providing you this Diddy coverage. We're going to give you recaps. We're going to break down these legal issues that happen almost every day in court. And one of the reasons we can do this and bring you this content is because we get amazing support from our incredible.
So
they're just experiencing a large amount of pain or just being very tired, because again, these aren't like quick sessions, nothing like that. These are hour-long sessions, day-long sessions where she would tell her partner, that being Diddy or Sean Combs, that she was just exhausted from it, and that there was one instance specifically where she threw up after having sex, I think, with a couple of men, and that she just wanted to stop, but he kept pushing her to keep going and going, according to her testimony. She even recalled that she would get back pain or neck pain and shoulder pain, and
now, indeed, if Diddy coerced her to have sex with these prostitutes, these male prostitutes, then I'd understand. These male sex workers, then I'd understand. However, there was no gun held to the held to the head of Jane in these instances, and so it's not gonna. Her credibility is a bit tainted in this instance because she participated in these freak offs willingly. She took the drugs willingly, and she wanted to prove herself to Diddy. However, you know, uh, it wasn't the case that Diddy wanted to seek a romantic relationship with her, and I would see this as being a person whose testimony can easily be broken down and cross. Wouldn't make the best of witnesses, but we'll see going forward how things are handled here. Let's continue.
kind of similar to Cassie's testimony, she experienced UTIs, urinary tract infections, about every week. She also experienced yeast infections from these hotel nights, and she said that she would still complete the nights, again, similar to Cassie's testimony, while still having a urinary tract infection, and explained that it was just very painful and that her pelvic area also experienced a lot of pain. And she said she didn't want to indicate negativity as far as why she just didn't tell him that she was experiencing this type of pain, but it seemed like from her standpoint, I think one thing that she's really kind of been driving a point during her testimony so far is that she felt compelled to do this because that's what he wanted, that's what turned him on, that's what made him happy, and she just didn't want to make him unhappy, so she did everything, even when she was feeling pain, even when she was experiencing injuries, even when she would throw up after just a sex session, that she just kept on going because that's what made him happy.
And again, there you can see it. I mean, this lady Jane wanted to prove herself to Diddy. That's exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to prove herself to Diddy in all its forms, and again, it's something that 1 second, I'm receiving a call here. Just 1 second here. Hello.
Hi, babe. No. Hey.
I am on air.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye. Yes. Unfortunately, my girlfriend's seeing if I'm on air, and I am on air. Thank you very much for joining me on Talk Live. But getting back to it, yes, yeah. I mean, this woman clearly wanted to prove herself to Diddy, and was willing to go through physical and mental distress in order to do it. But that is the game, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, that in order to obtain a life of supposed luxury and leisure, she would want to prove herself in these freak offs, and unfortunately, nothing came to pass with it. And Jane was, I would say, a jilted lover. However, again, this would this add to the prosecution case of sexual trafficking by fraud? I don't know. I think this is more of a jilted lover here. If she was coerced to do these, to make these acts, no. But I think she was a willing participant. So this could easily be broken down and crossed, and again, leading to the the start. I mean, the defense starting to gather wins with regards to the prosecution's witnesses. Let's continue.
And I know there was another episode where she says she even got sick. She threw up and basically was like, allegedly Combs basically said to her, okay, good, now you're ready for the next guy. You're ready for the third guy. And, I think it was interesting because I remember I read that she was asked, do you know how many times you basically told him that you didn't want to do these? And it's one thing to vocalize it. It's another thing to have the text messages. I understand there were a lot of text messages that were read that arguably were used to show she was vocalizing she did not want to be a part of this, right? What were the substance of these text messages?
So we did see a lot of text messages, especially towards the end of the day. So, for example, we didn't see because they are not showing the exhibits while Jane is testifying, but we did hear about one text message from November 22nd of 2021 where Jane was saying, I'm definitely feeling some type of way because she saw Diddy with another woman, saw this through their Instagram stories. I guess Diddy and this other woman were at his gym, at his
gallery.
So we did hear some audio notes, and these audio notes were from the defendant himself, that being Diddy. So I'm curious to know how the jury kind of interpreted these audio notes, mainly because when Diddy's inside that courtroom, while yes, he was kind of looking into the jurors, we don't hear from him very much. And so while he's sitting at the defense table in his sweaters, his undershirts, his slacks, I'm wondering how they thought listening to these audio messages, because we don't hear from him vocally while the trial is going on. And so we heard one audio note from Diddy where he says, I'm not going to be playing these games with you. I don't have time for these games. Get on your job. I was trying not to leave this message. Ain't no threat. I can't do this with you every time you're upset. I'm going to disappear on you and you'll have a rude awakening. And so as far as the get on your job, Jane was testifying that she believed that he had meant get on your jobs as far as doing these hotel nights. As far as her being in for a rude awakening, she thought that meant that he would take things away from her. Those things being the rent that he paid for her, the roof over her head that she lives it was a place that she lives at with her child. And so we see another audio note. But let me just kind of go back a little bit where Jane was saying that it felt really cold getting this. She thought that Diddy was going to cut her off. And then Diddy wrote in a text message after sending this audio note, get back to loving me now, LOL. Always paraphrasing here. He said a little bit more at the beginning of that. And then Jane responded, you've been making these feel transactional. And Jane said again that Diddy brought up her rent and she felt like it was a guilt trip kind of feeling getting these types of messages from him. Then we hear another audio note where Diddy is saying, you don't know how to move on. My tone is like this because I'm just waking up. And that, to Jane's point, it was another kind of instance where Diddy was threatening to take her rent away and kind of leave her in a position where she would either have to carry that $10,000 a month rent or have to find another place to live, because if the man that is paying your rent is kind of telling you he's not going to be, I feel like she was kind of a little bit concerned about that from her end.
So yeah, I mean, it was something that she didn't want, but it clearly was what it was, and this was indeed a transactional relationship between Diddy and Jane. She was getting rent paid. She was getting little trinkets and baubles from Diddy, and it kept a roof over the head of herself and her child. Now again, this is a simply contract. This is simply, it's deemed as quote unquote prostitution because, but I don't think she would see herself as she would see herself as a social media influencer rather than a lady of the night. So again, it can be deemed that she was, just a woman who had a transactional relationship with Diddy, uh, sex the way Diddy wanted, for cash, for money. And again, Diddy saw that all that it all for all that it was. However, again, Uh, Jane saw something more here. She wanted to be. She wanted to. You know, propel herself to the number one position in Diddy's life, but Diddy wasn't having it. So again, is this sexual? Is this sex trafficking by fraud? I don't think so. I think that this was simply a transactional relationship between the two people, which Jane wanted more, and Diddy wasn't willing to give more. So again, it's not. I wouldn't say the more groundbreaking of prosecutions. I mean, they're trying to pile on and show that there may have been coercion in this instance. But again, she couldn't have taken the money. She could have easily gone on with her life being a social media influencer and not had sex with Diddy. However, she did it for a reason. She did it for a purpose, and that was to aggrandize her life, to make her life better, and to see if she indeed would be would be number one in Diddy's life. But that wasn't the case. So let's continue.
I want to talk also about now the weaker parts of her testimony when it comes to sex trafficking. Because the big question is, was it properly communicated, the lack of consent, or the alleged or the perceived lack of consent? I have to tell you, there were parts of it that I'm not entirely sure. It wasn't as if, at least this point in the testimony, that, he grabbed her by the hair and threw her back in the room after she said no, or he directly threatened her. What were some of the parts of her testimony that you said, that might be a problem, that might be something that's exploited by the defense? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think one of the instances that might kind of tie into the RICO was just the fact that the assistants set up these hotel nights. There was one picture that we didn't see, but we heard about it from Jane's description, where she's here in New York City, or I think it might have been Los Angeles, one of the two cities, that she was waiting outside of the hotel room, waiting for Diddy, and that the assistants were up in the hotel and that they were getting the room ready. So in the photograph, according to her description of it, because unfortunately we can't see these exhibits, she was saying that you could see the red lights, and these were normally the lighting that they would use during these hotel nights or debauchery nights, that sort. And then there was another instance where Jane was explaining some of the exhibit photos that only she could see, only the jury could see, where there was a person who was Diddy's assistant, and his name was Brendan, and that Brendan would bring pills and bottles, and then that Jane would see cocaine, she would see ecstasy, and that she explained that security would also get drugs if they ran out of drugs. And I think one interesting thing is that Jane carried drugs for Diddy twice. She says in 2022 from Los Angeles to Miami, Diddy had told her something like, he said if I could pick up a package before the flight. But she also spoke to Christina Koram about this package over the phone, and she said that Christina Koram said, hey, just come, I'll have security give it to you. Jane had testified that Christina had told her, it's fine, I do it all the time. And I thought that was kind of an interesting point. She being Jane was explaining that this package was wrapped in a white envelope. She put it in her luggage. She checked the bag at the airport like we all do, maybe just without the drugs. But when we go visit the airport, and she said when she had landed, when she saw Diddy, that she gave him the drugs at his Miami home in the bathroom, and that these pills were ecstasy. And so I think maybe as far as RICO goes, I think they're really kind of trying to build into that, even though we're not hearing as much about the assistants as we might have done when Cassie was testifying. I think they are kind of laying out some puzzle pieces here and there as far as just what roles the assistants, whether it be Brendan, whether it be another assistant, whether it even be Christina Koram, that they also kind of played a role in either helping Jane get drugs over to Diddy if she was across the country, or just setting up these hotel nights, knowing what was gonna go down at these particular places.
No, I actually think that might help the prosecution, right? If they're trying to prove maybe predicate underlying crimes of, let's say, drug offenses, and they're talking about transporting drugs across state lines, and you're having Sean Combs' Inner Circle do it, that might help racketeering. And the more they talk about the assistants and the team, and I still believe Christina Korm's going to testify. I don't know for sure, but I have to imagine that she will. But in terms of sex trafficking, and in terms of the idea of a lack of consent, there were certain parts where it seemed to me that, she was expressing her dissatisfaction with certain sex workers, or maybe she was on her period, and she basically expressed this to Combs. He didn't necessarily force her to continue having sex in those episodes, right? I mean, if we're talking about a lack of consent and forcing her to do it, weren't there moments that seemed not great for the prosecution?
And again, before we get to those moments, I predicted it right here on Talk Talk Live just a few minutes ago that a lot of these moments between Diddy and Jane were consensual. It was a proving ground for Jane to show her love and devotion for Diddy, in terms of her getting involved with these freak offs and to to have sex with these other men and take money for it. Remember, she took money for these freak offs. She wasn't exactly coerced into these things, and she wasn't given any money. She was given money, uh, a lot of money. It was a transactional relationship to have these freak offs with Diddy. So again, she knew going in what was entailed with regards to these relationships. She wanted these relationships to change, of course, wanted to be more on a more romantic level after proving herself to Diddy, but that wasn't the case. It was strictly transactional, and that upset Jane. Now, again, as the lawyers were saying on Law and Crime, there, it was indeed, that can be proven by the prosecution, potentially, that the drug trafficking, being a tenet, a piece of the racketeering charge against Diddy, which their RICO case is built, can indeed hurt Diddy, in the sense that Jane has went on to testify that indeed she carried drugs over state borders in order to have these freak offs with Diddy, and not only he but his staff were involved with that as well. So again, this is that can be damaging to Diddy. That indeed can be damaging. That Jane et al., including Christina Corum and her and Diddy's staff, were carrying drugs across state lines in order to have these freak offs and do Diddy's bidding. That can be damaging in terms of outlaying a RICO charge. But in terms of the relationship, I don't see much damage being done here. Let's continue.
So we heard about a number of exhibits where these escorts photographs were shown to the jury and obviously shown to the witness, that being Jane. And so there was one exhibit where it was Dawn the escort, and that she and Diddy had used them up until August of 2024, and that's notably a month before his arrest. There was Paul the escort, and she had been using him from 2021 up until the last time, and that being July of 2024. That he was a personal trainer, he trained Diddy, but he also worked for Cowboys for Angels. You saw him in places like Los Angeles and Miami and Turks and Caicos. There's Leo the escort, met him in 2022 on her birthday, saw him up until 2023. They used him every so often. And another escort named Michael. But there was one escort who was unnamed, where we had kind of been alluding to him a little bit, and he's the one that Jane was explaining that she was immediately repulsed by him. He was really sweaty, he smelled, she was hesitant with him. She said she tried to make it work, she tried to seduce him, she tried to make an attraction happen, but he was just sweating so much, according to her testimony, that she was just kind of throwing looks at her partner, and her partner being Sean Combs, and she was trying to avoid performing oral sex on this unnamed escort. She said she told Diddy that she wasn't feeling it, so Diddy and Jane had sex while the escort was there, and he was kind of hovering over her, according to her testimony, and staring at her, and that Diddy finally excused the man. But Diddy came up with a plan B, where he brought in another escort in place of this man that repulsed Jane, and that person was Paul. And so there were times she was explaining that she didn't want to do the hotel night. So she had said that there was one night that she and Diddy were bickering because she didn't want to do the nights anymore, and that Diddy said, well, you don't have to do it anymore. And Jane said that she didn't believe that he really meant that, so she went back to the hotel room. Diddy gave her ecstasy, and then an escort came over, a sex worker came over, and
Sorry.
Jane said that she just couldn't do it with this man, but she wanted to make it up to Diddy. And so she later called another escort, and that escort being Cabral. And she said, at this point in my relationship, she just knew what Diddy wanted. But I think as far as maybe a juror is concerned, that could be a little confusing, where it's like, okay, is it sex trafficking, or are you just doing what your partner at the time or partner is just kind of wanting as far as his own sexual desires? Is it really non-consensual? I think that's kind of a moment that I personally was trying to hear about, where she was just like, this is non-consensual. I didn't get my permission for this to happen. But it seemed like from her testimony that we've heard so far, there hasn't been an instance that I can recall of her actually just being like, this is non-consensual, from what I've heard so far. But then she said, as far as all the
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. At no time during these proceedings with Jane was this non-consensual. I believe this was a consensual relationship with Diddy. For Diddy's money, she gave him her time and her sexual access. Plain and simple. So, is this would this be a good witness for the prosecution? I don't think so. I guess if you want to expose drug trafficking over state lines, maybe. But for the most part, Diddy was supposed to be having freak-offs with this woman illegally, but that wasn't the case. Diddy already said that if she didn't want to have the sex with these gentlemen or have these freak-offs, you could stop, no problem. But she knew the consequence of that. That would be the withdrawal of money. So she decided, no, I'm going to go for the gusto here. And again, it's a choice one person makes. So is this the most really thought-provoking and you know serious witness on the part of the prosecution in this instance? And I think not. No, I think Jane is another miss here on the part of the prosecution's case, along with Brianna Bangalon. And again, I think from that the defense is starting to get a bit more traction in with regards to the case and starting to eat their way back into the case. Let's continue.
Escorts that were shown to the witness and the jurors, that they weren't the only escorts that were used. She said that there was one man who was African American. He was an actor or a singer. They met twice at a hotel in L.A. There was a Spanish man met in 2022. She said he was a bit odd. There was a European man, met him in.
And do remember, this is going on for 3 or 4 years now. This is not something that was over within a few seconds or a few interactions. She was Diddy's paramour for a good 4 to 5 years time frame. That is serious. That is a pattern of behavior that, again, either shows that this woman had a gun held to her head, of which she clearly wasn't, or she was, clearly glad for the money that she had experienced there. So I don't know what this is, so we'll move that. Anyways, what the hell that was. But anyway, so yeah, so we will so again, it's not the most thought-provoking, it's not the most not one of the better, I'll say, for lack of a better word, one of the better witnesses on the part of the prosecution here, Jane, that is. I mean, she went through the 4-year relationship. She was given money. It helped with the situation at home with her family. And but she wanted more, and Diddy wasn't willing to give her more. And for that, it was a jilted lover. But she went through this period for 4 to 5 years simply because she thought she could be the next one. But of course, it's a lover scorn in this instance. Let's continue.
In LA twice, but she said all the entertainers, minus Cabral and Anton, were people that Sean knew. He set up these entertainers, and that as far as her kind of role in setting up the entertainers or escorts or sex workers, that she really kind of focused on Cabral and Anton, as far as these were the two that she had reached out to personally, and said that she knew it was to be expected that she was going to continue doing this. And she kept saying, I knew he expected me to coordinate the nights where entertainers are expected. And so I think that part of the testimony could be interpreted in a very kind of confusing way, because again, to what we're kind of trying to dissect is whether or not this was non-consensual or against her will. But according to her, it seemed like she did participate in them, and she did them at kind of the hest of Diddy, but also because she wanted to in a way. And so it seemed like that's kind of where it was going, a little confusing at parts, for sure.
Yeah, and I know that if I read it correctly, there were times she said he was so sweet. She talked about the love she had for him. She wanted to be in his arms. I mean, you're testifying against a criminal defendant accused of sex trafficking you. And I wonder if those could be problematic moments. By the way, how is the jury reacting to all this?
Yeah, so as far as the jury is reacting, I'm really kind of seeing no outwardly facial expressions from what I could see from them today, because I did get a little better view of them today, especially the second and third row. I think once the text messages started kind of getting a little more redundant and kept just going on and on and on, I did see some jurors kind of looking over to the clock, especially once we got to that 4 p.m. hour, 5 p.m. hour. People, I think, were kind of like, okay, it's almost the weekend, it's a Friday. But for the most part, I did see them still actively listening to the testimony. So they would either look at Maureen Comey, who was doing the questioning for the prosecution, or they would just look at Jane. And so there were some jurors who were doing kind of the back and forth. There were some who were just laser focused on Jane. But when those texts were coming out and when they were seeing those exhibit photos, I did see a lot of jurors really kind of intently looking at their screen, maybe just reading all the messages, because as fast as I try to write them, they really do go by pretty fast. And it was a lot of messages that they were sent. So I wonder what their thoughts were kind of seeing this and seeing some of the more explicit photos and text messages that were sent from Diddy to Jane or from Jane to Diddy, and even some of the messages that were sent to the escorts or entertainers too.
And how was Diddy behaving? Because we know he got into trouble.
Okay, we're gonna leave that there, ladies and gentlemen, because they're gonna go to Diddy's behavior. I wonder if they're gonna have any sort of cross examination on this day, but let's see.
Jane, him, the flow of cash, things like that. Was there a lot about the prostitution and the transportation angle?
So there was a lot of discussion about transportation to engage in prostitution, specifically when it comes to Jane. So, for example, there was one escort that they used, and this was the first escort that Jane even booked herself, and this was a man named Cabral, but he was someone who was from Atlanta that they coordinated just his travel arrangements, and it would either be Jane coordinating his travel arrangements, then she'd be reimbursed by Diddy, or it'd be Diddy's travel agent, because again, this is a man who's very wealthy. Of course, he would have his own travel agent, but I think the government is really kind of placing, again, those puzzle pieces to be like, oh, okay, you guys had flown him out from Atlanta to Los Angeles to attend these hotel nights. There was another time where that they had booked Cabral from Atlanta to New York to engage in these hotel nights. She was explaining that there were escorts used in Miami and New York and Los Angeles, all the way to Turks and Caicos. So as far as their Turks and Caicos trip, this was a trip that Jane really wanted to go on, because this kind of reminded her of the first lovely trip that the two had had together at the beginning of their relationship. And she thought that this was just going to be a trip for her and Diddy to reconnect, really just kind of get the love back, that they had had that type of trip. And she was explaining that she thought that it would, again, just be the two of them, but then it wasn't, that another escort had ended up coming, and that this escort was actually Paul. And so she was explaining that after the first day in this particular trip to Turks and Caicos, that Paul, the escort, had come, and that they had this 24-hour, one-day hotel night with him, and that she said that Jane was actually happy about this. After it was over, she had explained, she says that she was just excited to cuddle with Sean Combs. And Diddy had asked her, do you have more in you? And then he then invited Paul over to their villa, and then Diddy gave her this 2-heart bracelet. She says that Paul was really nice, but she just didn't want to have sex with him. But she says that she remembers that that night was super painful. She couldn't have sex anymore because she was extremely sore, especially after the 4th round that they were doing this. Diddy gave her more lubricants, and Diddy said something along the lines of, oh, you can't take any more D. And then Jane ended up throwing this bracelet that she had and said, you only want me here to suck D. And Jane was saying that she walked out. Diddy followed her and said something along the lines to her as, how could you do that in front of Paul? Diddy told her to apologize to Paul, and that she ended up doing that because she said, I did make a scene, and she ended up apologizing to him. However, Diddy didn't apologize to Jane for what he had done. And so it seems like, as far as just the arguments of transportation to engage in prostitution, I think Maureen Comey does kind of an excellent job of being like, okay, well, where did this occur? Where did you fly him out to? At what time? And who booked the travel arrangement? How were you reimbursed, if you were reimbursed? And so I think they're kind of, again, laying that foundation enough where it's kind of like, okay, you really do kind of, from the government's perspective, it seems like they do have a strong case, especially for the transportation to engage in prostitution, especially because they're in so many various cities. And then they even go outside of the country and internationally too.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I mean that's the only case that outside of the drug trafficking, the prosecution only witness that they could, only thing that they could really stand on with regards to this witness is the fact that they went to various places to have these freak offs with these different individuals for money. Now, um, again, it goes towards one of the predicate offenses with regards to Diddy's case. Yes, but were these consensual? Yes, because this lady would fly around the Turks and Caicos, fly to Atlanta, fly to New York, fly to Los Angeles, doing all these different freak offs with Diddy, post Cassie, and with that, she would she would receive money. She would receive different baubles, different trinkets of affection from Diddy. And again, the Turks and Caicos episode was a chance to rekindle their relationship because that's where they really first met. But it was clear then that Diddy only saw her as as someone to appease his penchant for freak offs. And she was on a 24-hour freak off with Diddy at that time with different escorts and for different sessions during the night, to the point where she was indeed sore while doing these freak offs, and it made her angry to a certain extent because she thought this being a romantic vacation when it wasn't in fact the case. So yes, I mean it's more piling on, but I mean a lot of this thing of this sex was consensual, and it was contractual in the sense that she received money for these things. She received different gifts for these different freak offs. So not exactly groundbreaking witness testimony, but again, it sets forward the predicate offenses. And once again, let's get back into them. We have them here on Talk Live, ladies and gentlemen. The RICO predicate offenses right here. Any act of uh, uh, extortion, arson, robbery, bribery, obscene matter. I guess it would get into that. Um, see, any act of bribery, counterfeiting, fraud, obstruction of justice, slavery, racketeering, gambling, money laundering, murder for hire. But again, you don't see really prostitution in these instances. But I guess if you're talking about racketeering, with regards to the drug charges, I guess if you see it for, I don't know if you can consider kidnapping in these instances, because this lady went to Turks and Caicos of her free will, really, in order to have the freak offs with Diddy, and dealing in an obscene matter. I guess that would be you know uh, uh, what we're dealing with here in terms of prostitution. But again, it's I guess it piles on, but is this the most groundbreaking of witnesses? I really don't think so, because this woman went willingly to do these things with Diddy, and she was paid handsomely for it. So let's just end things there on day three. I don't think the prosecution would. I don't think there was prosecution arrested, so we're going to leave it there for this day. However, let's get into the Monday of the Diddy trial, and let's see, a day after here. Let's see here what we got. I think it was this one here. Yeah, I think it was this one here. Yes, indeed, where Diddy and if we can get to the cross-examination of Jane and a new witness. So let's get into this here.
We have learned a lot more about the complicated relationship between Sean Diddy Combs and Jane, another alleged victim in this sex trafficking, racketeering, and prostitution case. From audio tapes to texts to payments to Homeland Security searches to extortion to alleged violence, what exactly happened in court today, and how does it fit into the overall case? Let's talk to our in-court reporter, Law and Crime's Elizabeth Milner, to get to the bottom of it. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law and Crime legal alert. If you received, she claims she vocalized in different ways to Sean Combs, her partner, how she didn't want to keep on doing this. She testified that Combs gave her cash and gifts and paid for her rent, but it's complicated. It's complicated by her messages to Sean Combs. It's complicated by her testimony that she was with Combs basically a few weeks up until his arrest. And you also have to wonder, is it also complicated with what she said today, including new allegations of violence that have changed the trajectory of her testimony? So a lot to get into with what happened today. Let me bring on Elizabeth Milner, Law and Crime's in-court reporter who was there for every minute of the action. Elizabeth, so good to see you.
to the jurors and the witness and the parties. Unfortunately, we weren't able to see them in the gallery because of a pre-existing order whenever Jane was to take the stand, and that has been going on since last week. So we haven't been able to see exhibits, I want to say, since last Thursday, but we're hearing these text messages as AUSA Maureen Comey and even Jane herself are just kind of reading through a number of these text messages, either from her and Diddy, between herself and the escorts. But as far as just her and Diddy goes, right off the bat, as we had started this morning, we see a text message between Jane and Diddy from September 15th of 2023, where Jane was texting Diddy.
So just to let you know, we are into week 5, ladies and gentlemen. We are into week 5 of the Diddy trial, and Jane is still on the stand, still giving prosecutorial evidence. And remember, Jane is the social media advisor, former Diddy assistant, who formed a relationship, sort of an affair with Diddy, and over a number of years post Cassie, in which they would participate in freak-offs together, they would take trips together. She wanted more of a relationship than he was willing to give, and with that came the end of said relationship. Up until, as they stated, up until Diddy's final arrest on these on the RICO charges, in which she was thrown in jail. So she's been there for a long time. So to say that she was a victim, it would be a tough order for the prosecution. However, the testimony continues up until, yesterday, and we continue with it right now.
On these different phones because he has more than one phone, and Jane would say, should we start looking for Sunday night flights? And Jane said, love and miss you, mine's forever. And Diddy's responding, send me some SHIT of you being a bad girl. And Jane believed that those messages about her sending him something was for her to send sexually explicit videos to Diddy, and Diddy had responded, when is the earliest you can get here? Jane says that she didn't want to send this particular video, and Diddy said something along the lines of, the F, I'm asking you to do this, I have the phones, and those phones being with the phones that they have of explicit videos together. Diddy said, stop it, don't say no to me, and Jane says, well, I'm traveling with our phone, and Jane says that Diddy would record on his 2 phones, and then his assistants and staff had easy access to it, so they had this separate phone to record their sexually explicit videos together. And Jane was saying in these messages, that phone doesn't look, and I'm paraphrasing here because they go by so fast when they were kind of saying these out loud, and Jane had said, you're using our vids to get erect with someone else. And Diddy said, bye, I was asking you to send something, good night. Jane says, well, I'm not going to New York, you're texting me so that way you can get erect for somebody else. And Jane says that she saw on a podcast that he was bragging essentially about having sex for 48 hours completely with someone else. And so Diddy had told her that no sex was involved on this trip, where he was going on this podcast with another person, another woman that Diddy was seeing, and just kind of bragging about this. And this 48-hour trip that he was kind of talking about was on a yacht, and that Diddy told her that he was going to take her on this specific trip, and that Jane agreed to do a hotel night after he had promised her to take her on this trip, and that he ended up not taking her on the trip. So it seems like it's kind of going possibly into the prosecution's argument, which they believe it's sex trafficking by fraud, where he was promising her to do these things and then she would comply with it, but then he would end up not taking her out on special dinners or anything like that. And you kind of can see both sides of this, right? Where, okay, is it a crime for a man to lie to you? Not necessarily, but according to the prosecution and their argument, they think because that she was complying and doing these hotel nights, that kind of played into their kind of theory of the case. And so then we see more exhibits, text messages from Jane and Diddy, where Diddy is saying, what happened? I'm sad, what happened? Jane is saying, well, I don't want to be used and locked in a room to fulfill your fantasies. We hear about an exhibit from September 16th of that same year of 2023. But this one is a note from Jane's notes app, where she says that she kind of just writes out her feelings similar to diary entries, and then sometimes will kind of copy and paste, send them as a text message, where Jane did just that, where she had said, as much as I want to see you, I don't want to be treated like a hoe in a hotel room. And Jane was explaining that she was just writing out her feelings. And so then we hear about more texts between Jane and Diddy, where Jane is saying, I don't want to be used, locked in a hotel room. I'm starting to realize what this is. And Diddy saying, girl, that was podcast podcast talk. I was alone. I'm tired of your false accusations. I promise on baby love, who is his youngest daughter, I didn't have sex. And Jane was saying that wasn't podcast talk, and saying that you made Papa proud. And this was kind of in reference to this podcast where Diddy was kind of talking about this 48 hours of sex, essentially. And Diddy had said, bye, always tripping around me. And so then we kind of see more text exhibits where Jane was saying that she wanted to go back to when they first started dating. She said, I opened Pandora's box. She can't seem to close it. She said, one night of fun turned into our entire relationship. I'm crying as I'm writing this. And Diddy is responding, stop, girl, let's talk. And then he sends her an audio message. And then Diddy can be heard on this particular audio message. So the jury is hearing this. We're hearing this out loud inside the courtroom, where Diddy has kind of this raspy voice, and he's saying that he was sick in bed. The message you sent me, what's the problem? We have an actual open relationship. What's the problem? And that Diddy never brought up kind of her concerns about doing these hotel nights. Instead, he just never talked about it in this particular audio message. And so Diddy ended up calling her on a FaceTime and told her what she wanted to hear. That's what she testified to. And Jane testified, he said a lot of things that I like to hear, that he loves me, that he missed me, that he wanted to see me. And so Jane ended up agreeing to go to New York. And this was a trip to New York in September of 2023, where she thought that she was going just for alone time with her boyfriend. And then what ended up being alone time with her boyfriend actually turned into them messaging Cabral, who was an escort that they had used often in their freak-offs. And then Cabral was flown out from Atlanta, Georgia, over here to New York, and that Jane participated in this freak-off with Diddy and, with Cabral, as Diddy kind of watched, and that was what it ended up happening. And so we saw a lot of text messages where she was really just kind of explaining her frustration as far as why Diddy was treating her this way, and making her out to be kind of someone who was only used to fulfill his fantasies, as opposed to the other women that he was kind of taunting out there, kind of to what she was kind of describing in her face a little bit, where she was kind of kept a secret, and that her job essentially was to hire these other men, or to bring these other men for their hotel nights or debauchery nights. And so we saw a lot of text messages from around that time frame where she seemed to be very vocal about voicing her opinion on that she didn't want to do it. But then I think kind of where that area is where maybe it kind of confused the jury is that even afterwards she still did it. And so I feel like when cross-examination eventually happens, that they'll really kind of be like, okay, well, you continue to do this even after you said you didn't want to do this, and you said this but you did that. And so overall, a lot of text messages were shown that really kind of voiced Jane's opinion about just not wanting to do these hotel nights anymore.
Well, again, as she alluded to right there, Ms. What's it now? Millet? Yes, as the prosecution, as the witness, well, as the in court reporter was saying, I mean, it's very difficult for the prosecution to see this as more or less a credible witness, to see this as a groundbreaking witness, simply because she continued with this pattern of behavior over years. Yes, there were in bits of racketeering through drug trafficking, and also through sex trafficking over state lines with regards to the free costs. But the fact of the matter is, she helped design these nights, these freak off nights with Diddy over a number of years, and she thought things would change. She thought that this would lead to a romantic relationship with Diddy, when in fact Diddy was allegedly sleeping with somebody else. Diddy was allegedly uh, did not want anything of this relationship, and it was literally, she was there to be paid. Diddy liked her participating in his freak offs. He paid her for her time, and at the end of the day, she could have easily walked out of it. But the money, the lure of money. I mean, at some estimation, some $10,000 a month. It was too much of a lure to bear, to walk away from, and the chance of being Diddy's lady also was another incentive for her to continue with things. But again, I guess you can show some predicate offenses in this instance, but is she the most credible of witnesses? No, and there are a lot of holes in her testimony. The fact of the matter, she continued with this relationship over a 5-year span, and she could have easily gotten out of it, but The money was too good. Diddy was too powerful. Diddy was too powerful a man to resist, and she wanted something more. She wanted some romantic relationship. So is she more? Is she something like a Mia, or was she like a Cassie? Was she like a woman who was she like any of those ladies who indeed were allegedly uh, battered and essayed by Diddy? In any way, shape, or form and caught on camera? No, she wasn't, because she, and through these loaded text messages, she was very compliant with much of Diddy's wishes, and she didn't need much coercion in order to participate in and put forward any of and do any of Diddy's bidding. To be fair, Frank. So again, I think the defense will have a field day with this one, as they did with Brianna Bangalan, and yeah, it's not exactly the best of witnesses for the prosecution. To be fair, let's continue.
Yeah, I saw there was some reporting where she allegedly said, "I'm not a porn star. These experiences are desensitizing sex for me. It's been 3 years of me having to bleep strangers." There was another, "You pair me up with some random man, any bleep for your own sick sexual." And there were parts where it looked, I mean, I wonder if the jury will accept, was he threatening her directly, indirectly? I mean, I believe there was one message, "You're burning a bridge that you're going to need tomorrow." And we know that financial control is a big part of this, gifts, cash, rent. But I have to tell you, Elizabeth, my jaw hit the floor. I think a big controversial moment, if we're trying to understand whether or not she was a willing participant or consented to this, didn't she write in a text message to Sean Combs that she consented in the videos of these sexual encounters? Because we know, according to her testimony, that Sean Combs have recorded some certain of these sex acts. And he basically said what? That if people look at these videos, they'll see it was consensual. Didn't she agree with that? Or I might be completely wrong.
So Jane was kind of vocalizing just her displeasure of having to do these wild debauchery nights or hotel nights just with other men, that she always wanted to be having sex with her partner, and her partner being Sean Combs. So she messaged Diddy saying that you place these harmful men on me, and Diddy had responded, "Well, talk to God, I'm gonna pray for you, you're burning a bridge that you aren't prepared to pay for." And Jane said that in the text that she knew that she had consented to being on this tape, but she said she was uncomfortable, but she kept doing this because she loved Diddy, and that Diddy kind of even threw in her face that she appeared to be enjoying it. She appeared to be excited even while she was on these freak-off tapes or these sexually explicit videos. And Jane says, "Well, I'm sorry, I want to feel better." And that was in reference to her just feeling uncomfortable throughout this entire process. And so Jane admitted while she was on the stand that she did watch her own freak-off tapes, and she said that I was being high and following a pattern in the majority of these tapes. It was like watching the same show over and over again. And so this was kind of at a point in, I guess, her and Diddy's relationship where she was really just kind of telling him that she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights anymore, and that the videos were kind of thrown back into her face. But it seems like from her perspective, while she was on the stand, I should say, that she didn't feel as comfortable as maybe the video may have portrayed her to look as more comfortable and consenting in this process.
Yeah, I wonder how much the jury is going to wrestle with the idea. Did she vocalize enough her perceived lack of consent? You know, there was a part of it where she talked about in her notes app, she said she was having PTSD, but was that properly communicated to Sean Combs? It's important for a legal analysis. Now, there was another change in her testimony, because she had testified she's having these problems with Sean Combs, right? They're back and forth on this. And then Cassandra Ventura files her lawsuit in November 2023. What was her reaction to Cassie's lawsuit? And what did she communicate to Sean Combs after that lawsuit came out?
And so I will say this about the prosecution when they were kind of laying this out to get eventually to Cassie's lawsuit, is they were kind of showing us piece by piece, month by month, all these text exhibits, or we were hearing about these text exhibits. The jury actually saw them, but just about how Jane was uncomfortable that, by doing these hotel nights, right? But then we get to Cassie's lawsuit, and I was really kind of surprised to hear Jane's reaction while she was on the stand about Cassie's lawsuit. Because even in reference before, where her and Diddy would get in kind kind of these verbal spats with one another where Jane would kind of throw out, I'm no Gina, I'm no Cassie. And so I thought, okay, well, once we get to Cassie's lawsuit, maybe she didn't have the nicest things to say about Cassie in reference to her lawsuit. But as far as Jane is concerned, it was actually the opposite of what I was initially thinking. So when we get to the part about Cassie's lawsuit, Jane was explaining that it was all over the place. I almost fainted. In fact, I think I did. And then Maureen Comey asked, well, why? And she says, because there were 3 specific pages that were just harrowing. And mind you, when Jane's on the stand, she is very soft-spoken. Sometimes when she's like testifying, I'm just kind of like, oh my goodness, I need to hear you a little bit louder. But she's very soft-spoken when she's on the stand. But Jane was explaining that she read the entire complaint and that she said these pages resembled my own experience. I was bewildered. I was in shock. I couldn't sleep. It felt like a nightmare. And so the jury was able to see an exhibit of Cassie's lawsuit that was filed on November 16th of 2023. Jane said previously she did meet Cassie a couple times, but in passing. She said it was around the 2015-ish time frame. So that's notably when she was when Cassie was still with Diddy. And the two had met at a fashion show and at a Father's Day celebration. But the two never spoke outside of just meeting each other in passing years before she had even filed her lawsuit, that being Cassie. But Jane was saying that she had a lot of sympathy. She says, I can't believe I'm reading my own story. And that was in reference to Jane talking about Cassie's lawsuit. And then this is when she's kind of getting emotional on the stand, a little choked up here, where Jane was explaining that she texted Diddy after. So we heard about a text message, this from November 17th of 2023. It was between Jane and it was between Diddy. So that was the day after Cassie had filed her lawsuit, but also the same day that lawsuit was settled, but also the same day the federal government opened their investigation into Diddy. So a lot's kind of going on in that day unknowingly to Jane. But the text from Diddy said, SMH, I'm stressed and sad. We're supposed to be on the same page. Jane said, well, how can we both be on the same page? And then she was saying that she had to go to the doctor. And then Jane, a couple days later on November 19th, she said, I've been crying for 3 days. I feel like I'm reading my own sexual trauma. You recently threw me up in a hotel for days. God woke me up from this sick trauma. And again, I'm paraphrasing here. There was a lot more in this message where Jane was explaining, I feel manipulated. This was sexual exploitation. You knew this was coming. You made me feel gaslit. You made me feel crazy. Because also remember around this time, everyone, Jane was texting Diddy that she was starting to feel very uncomfortable doing these hotel nights and felt like that was the only thing that she was being used for. Then Diddy, a couple days after she had sent that message about crying for 3 days, Diddy said, call me on this phone. It's important. So then there was an exhibit that we heard about. It's from November 19th of 2023. It was a file. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe it's an audio note, it's a voice note, but it was a recording of a phone call. And so you hear Diddy picking up this phone, or at least answering on this phone saying hello. And then it's weird because it kind of sounds like they're in a car. It sounds like they're outside. It was kind of weird to at first initially listen to this. And so I'm trying to write down everything that Diddy is saying to her. And he is saying, I'm sorry you feel this way. I know we can't talk on these phones. I called and reached out to you. Sorry you feel this way. It was some kinky SHIT I thought we both enjoyed. I don't want you to feel this way. I'm not supposed to talk on the phone. And then you can hear Jane saying, I've been crying for 3 days, reading it all for word. But what's interesting, Jesse, is that this was a recorded phone call between Jane and Diddy, but Jane said while she was testifying today, she had no idea she was being recorded. She had no idea. She wasn't the one who hit record. She doesn't know how this particular phone call was recorded, but Diddy's on this recording saying, well, everything we did was mutually together. But I think a big question for me is listening to this audio message. I didn't know if he was talking about Jane or if he was talking specifically about Cassie. And so Jane was saying on this recording, well, I'm just effed up right now. It still bothers me. But then you can hear on this particular audio recording just kind of like, at first I didn't know what that sound was, but then Jane had testified that she heard Diddy writing with a Sharpie and a notepad on this recording. So possibly insinuating that he was taking some notes and writing down what she was saying. And so we hear this on the recording, just kind of the scratching of what she says was like a Sharpie pen onto a notepad. And then Diddy's on this recording saying, well, I'm here to help you. You know what I'm saying? Try and take a deep breath, okay? How can I be there for you? Let's get through this together. This was some kinky fun together. I need you to get some rest, please. And then Jane's on the recording saying, I'm going to pray for you. Then Diddy's on the recording saying, call KK if you need me. And Diddy asked if Jane was recording him, which is ironic given the fact that Jane was the one who was unknowingly being recorded on. And so Diddy was saying, yeah. And so Diddy was saying that he can't talk on this phone. And Jane was saying that she had told Diddy that we were just talking about this, that being the sexual traumas that she experienced. And then obviously with Cassie's lawsuit, it really brought out more things. And then Diddy's on this recording saying, well, you bought me the videotape to look at what we do. Can you get some sleep and we'll talk to you later, or later talk to KK. I need your support, please. If you need anything, call. He said, I need your support, please. If you need anything else, call KK. And then Jane and Diddy spoke on the phone that day. We hear another recording from the same day, November 19th of 2023. Still same instance where Jane didn't know she was being recorded. And Diddy can be heard on this recording saying, I really need your friendship right now. I called you back to make sure you're breathing. You know you don't have to worry about nothing else, and nothing else, implying about her rent, her financial situation. And then Diddy said, please pray for me. I'll pray for you. I need your friendship. And so it was kind of interesting to hear this. I mean, you know, for us in the press and the media, we've all heard Diddy's voice. I think for the jurors, I'm always wondering what's going on in their head when they're hearing this recording, because as much as, you know, the defendant was a little animated sometimes prior to the judge kind of admonishing him, you really never hear from him. And so I'm wondering all the time when we hear him through his mouth, through his words, allegedly, I'm always wondering what's kind of going through their mind as they're kind of hearing this. But from what I even saw of them, Jesse, it seemed like they were just kind of listening to all of this listening to this and taking it all in.
Well, I wonder if an argument could be made that will be probably made by the prosecution. He did this purposely because he had consciousness of guilt. He knew the Cassie lawsuit. He knew other people could come forward and say something. And he was basically trying to have her on tape, maybe acting like he didn't know this was being recorded, but having her on tape, taking notes. Everything was consensual. This was just freaky, right? We're all good. You know, I'm here for you. You know, again, that could backfire and be quite problematic in the eyes of the jury. Him recognizing that he needs to get everybody else on the same page to say that nothing bad happened, and that, you know, because he realizes that this could be quite problematic. And it seems to me, because we found out that she was basically with him until weeks before his arrest, she was there for another important event. Didn't she testify that she was there when CNN published the hotel surveillance footage of him purportedly beating up Cassie Ventura, and was also there for his planned response, and was also there I think it came out today, his Instagram apology that he released 2 days after the tape was published by CNN. She was a part of all that, right? She was there for all that.
Before we go into that, yeah, I mean, I think this is where the prosecution has their get back in this instance, where indeed Diddy's trying to cover his tracks. Diddy's trying to say that, you know, all that we were doing was consensual, and to a certain extent that it was. But with the storm of Cassie filing a lawsuit, and with Diddy at the end of the day settling with Cassie 24 hours later, he knew the Sharks were going to circle, and he knew that he was going to face not only that action, but also many other actions that have already come to mind here with Mia and with others. To be sure, so he wanted to make sure he, you know, crossed his I's, dotted his T's, and make sure that everything, all things with everyone else was consensual, and everything else was good. So that's the reason why he had these recorded phone calls, because he knew prosecution was coming. So it's in preparation of prosecution, quite simply, which isn't in and of itself illegal to do so. But again, I think the problem that she was recorded without her consent, that may be problematic in and of itself. But I think Diddy was getting ready for trial, and he was getting ready for trial, and a lengthy one. And he was getting ready for different civil actions from different women coming forward, you know, trying to get a piece of Diddy's pie. And so he wanted to smooth things over with the likes of Jane to say, hey, what we're doing was safe, what we're doing was consensual. Please pray for me. I'll pray for you. We're, all is good with us, right? And basically trying to create a scene where, yes, indeed, all was well and consensual. But as they were saying, during many of the announcements post Cassie civil action and civil complaint, she was there. She was there to witness it all. And again, I think he was trying to, then he was really trying to play Mr. Loverboy, trying to Mr. Romantic, and trying to indeed endear himself to Jane et al. Well, especially Jane, because she had been there from 2021. Post Cassie, in order to engage in these free calls for a longer period, so that she would not file a suit on him. So just basically to cover his tracks. So it is it's funny how things change in this instance, and how indeed the prosecution get their get back here, because I really didn't think the prosecution had anything to go on with regards to Jane, but I think now that the Cassie suit came to the fore, and Jane saw herself in Cassie. Diddy said, I can't have another lady come after my have vast amounts of evidence against me and try to sue me, and I'll have to give up more of my fortune in order to settle that case. So he tried to cover his bases, as it were. But let's continue.
Yeah, honestly, Jesse, in my notes, when they finally played the apology video that I've been thinking that they were going to play possibly even on day one of trial, I wrote finally, literally finally, with 4 exclamation points, because I'm like, when are they going to show the jury this apology video? But yes, around this time, it was May of 2024, CNN released the video of the Intercontinental Hotel incident, and Jane was explaining that around this time that she was over at Diddy's home in Miami at 2-Star Island, and that they were just sleeping. Then one of his sons knocked on the door and said something is happening, and so then Diddy leaves kind of the bedroom area where they were laying down. And then Jane ended up taking kind of her phone out to see what was going on. And she said, well, all I saw was Sean assaulting Cassie in a hotel. And then Jane was explaining that she had watched the video that CNN released, and that what ended up happening is Diddy invited Jane into a huddle where they could kind of, from what she was describing it, as kind of like a PR thing. It felt like that they were trying to find a way to kind of get out there in front of this, come up with some type of response, and that response ended up being a social media video. But to me, I thought it was interesting just the amount of planning and the drafts that this particular video went through before it was published on Instagram, and then obviously it's no longer there. But Jane was explaining that they were trying to come up with this very sincere apology post. They didn't play the video at this point, but then Jane was explaining that the next day Diddy showed Jane a draft of what he would say. And the draft, I thought this was pretty interesting, is that Diddy did address Cassie by name. I think when the video was actually released, a lot of us were like, notably, he did not say her name, but there's a reason for that, and I'll get to that in just a second. But Diddy was telling Jane about the Cassie video, and really kind of going in depth about it in June/July of 2024, and was explaining to Jane that Diddy said that this was the only time that Cassie and Diddy had a physical violent altercation like that, and that Diddy had told Jane that Cassie was actually the hitter in this situation. Obviously, with Cassie's testimony, we know that not to be true, but Jane said that she gave Diddy final feedback on the apology video, and then she went back to LA, and then she saw the apology video, and then we hear the apology video, and the jurors finally see it. It's something that we at Law & Crime have seen a number of times, but I think for the most part it presumably has been the jurors' first time seeing this video. And so then you hear Diddy say, it's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times of your life. My behavior on that video was disgusting. I had to go to therapy. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry. And then Jane said that she didn't feel this apology was genuine, this particular apology video. And then there was a whole objection from the defense. The jury is dismissed. They're given a break. But then we kind of get into why there was an objection by the defense. And so the government came out and they were like, okay, we'll strike the last part of that answer, where Jane was saying that she didn't feel like this apology video was genuine in terms of comparing it to the final draft that was posted versus the draft that she saw, where you do hear Cassie's name. I guess we didn't see that draft, nothing like that, but the draft that actually went out to the public didn't mention Cassie by name. But then the defense chimed in about that, and they were like, well, there was talk about naming Cassie by name. Agnifilo told this to Diddy around this time, because Mark Agnifilo was already Diddy's lawyer by this time. He told us in court today, but Mark Agnifilo was the one who was actually like, do not name Cassie in this apology video. Why? Because she's going to be a grand jury witness, and she likely was a grand jury witness around this time frame. And so the defense was like, well, this this entire line of questioning is inappropriate. And the government said, well, this is relevant as it's going into kind of what Jane ends up testifying to next as far as Diddy beating her. But the judge said, I do see the relevance if Ms. Comey is talking about state of mind, but then the defense seems kind of like, okay, well, this is like a confidential discussion. This is privileged communication. And so then Maureen Comey was eventually like, okay, we'll strike it because I respect privilege issues. And so the jury was told to disregard that part about the video not appearing genuine. But when the jury came back from the break, they replayed that video once again. And Jane knew that this was in reference to the hotel video that we have now seen in the trial multiple times, and that the next time she saw Diddy after this video was released was not until June 18th of 2024. And from Jane's testimony today, that was a date that she specifically remembers. Just a lot of things happening, and a lot of things did happen according to her testimony. But she said after that apology video was released, in May of 2024, then the next time she saw him was in the next month later, that being in June of 2024 too.
It's fascinating to see what was going on behind the scenes. We had always speculated, did he have any help? Was this planned? Was it spur of the moment? So just taking this testimony, it's fascinating to hear about it. Now, she also testified about being extorted. What happened there?
So what's interesting, Jesse, is this alleged extortion.
Okay, before we get to the alleged extortion, thank you very much for joining me here in Talk Live. We are live here on YouTube. If you are on Instagram, I hope you stayed with us. If not, I think the hour has passed now, and unfortunately we cannot broadcast on Instagram again unless I renew the feed, and then that would be another case altogether. But again, we're coordinating things here, so we are live on YouTube right now, exclusively live on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me at Talk Live. Like, subscribe, comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. But back to it. Yeah, so a bombshell in terms of her not feeling that Diddy was genuine in the apology video that she helped to craft for Diddy, allegedly. That was a bombshell in and of itself. That was something that we were waiting for from Jane, because again, she was an ineffectual witness until then. Skirting around prosecution, skirting around drug trafficking, that sort of thing. But again, that's more piling on everything. But most of it was consensual. And again, Diddy tried to say that it was consensual. Now she was a part of this video that regarding the apology for the beating at the Intercontinental Hotel. And again, she was trying to be, Diddy was trying to conclude her in the inner circle so that he eventually wouldn't be prosecuted by her. But again, she says that, she thought of his thing to be not non-genuine, and again, it was a bombshell in terms of objection from the defense, saying that that was that they couldn't say that it wasn't ingenuine, and again, they motioned to strike that statement, and here we are. We are now getting into the good stuff in terms of what indeed Diddy was doing with regards to Jane. So let's continue with it.
Actually happened prior to the May 2024 CNN video release of the Intercontinental Hotel incident from 2016. And Jane was explaining this happened shortly after the HSI raids on Diddy's home in both Miami as well as Los Angeles. But I thought what was interesting is that Jane said that investigators even came to her front door. She saw this on a Ring camera video and said that the investigators left a card for her, and that Diddy had paid for Jane's lawyers. And after Jane had sent a message to Hakeem, who had worked for Diddy at this point, and then he helped her get in touch with Diddy's lawyers. And then what ended up happening is that the escort Cabral ended up calling Jane, saying that he was going to release the sex tapes on the dark web, presumably after he saw that these HSI raids were being conducted. Because remember that day, I remember that day very clearly, where it was just like kind of like all hands on deck. Diddy's homes are being raided, and so I presume that Cabral might have seen this on the news, and then he had called Jane saying that he was going to release their sex tapes on the dark web, and that Diddy ended up picking up the wrong phone to record this hotel night or debauchery night, and ended up recording this sexually explicit video on Cabral's phone as opposed to Diddy's phone, where that was originally intended it to be. And so Jane was explaining that her heart was just beating so fast and that Cabral wanted $10,000 for this video. And so Jane ended up calling Diddy to tell him that Cabral was extorting her. She's getting kind of emotional as she's talking about this because she said a media company ended up calling her and saying that they bought this particular tape and that they were going to end up releasing it. But then she had explained that this media company, which she didn't name or anything like that, so we don't know in terms what type of media company it was that purchased this video, but she had explained that they didn't end up releasing this video. And she said even after he being Cabral had extorted her, she never saw him again. And so this was March of 2024, where she was explaining that she had never saw Cabral again even after this incident. The two had never spoken since then. And so it was kind of interesting because I remember even just around that time, there was a lot of rumors swirling around that people have videotapes of Diddy and these freak-offs. But according to Jane's testimony, she said that a media company did buy it. But again, we don't know this media company. We don't know who they are, if they were actually going to plan on releasing it. But she was explaining again that she and Cabral never spoke after this particular alleged extortion.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, more twists and turns in that Cabral, one of the escorts that participated in these freak-offs with Jane and Diddy, wanted money for the videotape that they had filmed of the freak-offs there that was at the behest of Diddy, allegedly. And again, it was noted that Cabral, I believe, never received any money for the transaction there, and no video was released to the dark web. And again, it's remains to be seen why that was indeed the case. Maybe Diddy saw to it that tape not be released unless under his strict instructions. But yeah, it's getting seedier and seedier here, and Jane has. Now we're starting to see why she was indeed being brought to be a credible witness. At first, none of what she was doing was really, really credible, but now the prosecution is starting to win back points, especially with regards to this prosecution witness, Jane. She's sending out revelations with regards to the Cassie, the eventual Cassie lawsuit, with regards to the videotape from Diddy, with regards to now this alleged release of this dark web, of this video on the dark web of the freak off involving Jane and Cabral, the escort. It is it is quite salacious, very damning in terms of Diddy here. And again, I think it was at this point where Diddy was just doing damage control. His defense attorney is trying to advise him, not to put anything out there that may incriminate himself. But again, it is, yeah, certainly damning the amount of revelations that are coming out that Diddy wasn't exactly too assured in terms of eradicating most of this evidence. And again, this is where indeed the avalanche started in terms of Diddy and in terms of his steep descent into this part of trial and this RICO charge. Let's continue.
Yeah, I wonder how that fits into the overall charges. Maybe to say, there was a lack of consent. There was a lack of her wanting to have these videos or even these videos released. It wasn't so much on Combs as it was on allegedly on somebody else. So it's interesting, they testify about that. I have to say, I think the finances are really interesting. So the idea, right, Sean Combs controls someone's appearance, controls their careers, controls their livelihood. And there was testimony earlier where she talked about how she wanted to do OnlyFans and he discouraged it. The way that I was reading it, it came up again about her earning her own money. Talk to us about this and whether or not this was during a break in the relationship, because I guess the idea would be if she's earning money on her own, that goes to the idea of this is what she could have been doing, but Sean Combs was controlling it. He was controlling her life. He was controlling her finances to get her to do what he wanted. Did she talk about earning her own money?
she did talk about earning her own money. So this was during an off period that the two had. So this was specifically around January of 2024, where Jane said that her finances actually started to pick back up after she created that OnlyFans. And so she was saying that she just wanted to be independent again, and this is why she had created the OnlyFans page.
Need I say more? We've gone on through this on Talk Live that, a lot of women are resorting to OnlyFans in order to get their own money. Especially those who aren't as career driven or remotely educated in order to make a living. They don't have career skills. So they ran to OnlyFans. And again, with Jane's history, she made money. So again, that's a story in and of itself. We've already covered that here on Talk Live. Let's continue.
And that Jane said that she also got child support to help with her finances, but that another man too, this man named Bear, sent her money, and that money was $9,000, so just shy of that extra $1,000 to pay for her rent. But the kind of exchange for it is that Jane would pose for Bear's brand, and that she never actually saw this man in person, but that they only communicated through text. And so it seemed like, as far as Jane was concerned, that her finances were picking up. So Jane was explaining by the time that she and Diddy got back together, which was shortly after her birthday of 2024, that Diddy came to LA, she went to Miami, that things started to seem like they were getting back on track. But then Diddy went through Jane's phone and saw these messages from this man named Bear. And so then we hear about this text exhibit from March 7th of 2024, when the two were already back together at this point, where Diddy said, what's going to happen when I come over? Jane said, well, should I get the house ready for us? And Jane thought that Diddy wanted her to have entertainers over. Diddy told Jane that his mom was coming into town this weekend, and Jane thought that he was just using this as an excuse to see other women. Then Diddy was kind of threatening to cut her off a little bit, where Diddy had asked Jane to sign something so that the two could move on, because he told her that, well, she's making her own money and that they hope to have a clean break. And so Jane was saying that she had testified that she told Diddy that she was paying off her debt, that she was unemployed. She said she was penny pinching. She took on credit card loans. She said that all she asked from Diddy was 3 months, and that she told him, you aren't having your way and you bring up my rent. I'm tired of it. You can't even make these 2 years. And those were the 2 years that the two had promised each other under the love contract, where he would essentially pay her rent for a 2-year period. And so Jane was saying, did you tell Robin to cut me off? She texted me that my lease is up in April of 2024. And then it seemed like, from Diddy's point of view, that he was really upset about this Bear interaction, but other interactions too that Jane had had with other men when she and Diddy were no longer together. But it seemed like, from Jane's perspective, even though she was making money on OnlyFans, even though her finances were slowly picking back up, she seems like she still kind of wasn't pulling strings, even as far as kind of making the rent on her own, where she was still asking for money from Diddy. And I feel like that's something that the defense might actually point to, especially as it's still currently going on even today. Yeah,
the timeline of the relationship, the rent, the paying for the lawyer, some of the ways that she vocalized or maybe didn't vocalize her reluctance to this, it's all avenues for the defense to exploit, to say that this is not a clean-cut case of sex trafficking, right? And I wonder if things changed when she started talking about violence. So she had already testified that there were certain times when she physically didn't want to engage in these behaviors, these acts, and she still did them. Was it to make him happy? Did she feel the pressure? But talk to me about the violence, because this was something, the alleged violence, this was something that was previewed by the prosecution in the opening statements. What did she say today about violent encounters she had with Sean Combs, or allegedly had with Sean Combs?
Well, she brought up this date specifically, and that date being June 18th of 2024, a date, according to Jane, that she'll always remember. And so Jane was saying that she saw Diddy at her apartment, the very apartment where he still pays her rent, and that Diddy was coming back from a family trip from Utah. And then we hear about this exhibit, and an exhibit was shown to the jury and the witness that was of Jonathan, that was Diddy's assistant. And Jane said that Jonathan helped her stock up the fridge, She put candles up, put red lights up, because red lights was something that Diddy particularly liked. And so then the jury is shown an exhibit photo of Jane, of herself that night. It's kind of a mirror selfie. I was able to get kind of like a little glimpse of it. But Jane said that she and Diddy were having together time that night. She wasn't expecting to have an entertainer that night, that the two were just going to spend a normal night together. And so then the jury sees exhibit photos of Diddy over at her house. They see exhibits of the photos of the red lights in her house, and Jane is explaining that Sean really liked red lights. And then the jurors also seeing a video of Sean Combs. And weirdly enough, the song Lovely Day was playing in the background. And given what she explained next, it was kind of ominous kind of hearing that particular song. But Jane was explaining after the video that she and Diddy got into an argument, that she and Diddy were not on drugs necessarily during this portion, that the two just had champagne and they had tequila together, and that Jane ended up confronting Diddy on who he was with while he was on this family trip to Utah. And Jane was calling him a pedophile, even though the prosecution had to really kind of point out that Diddy wasn't with someone who was underage, that this girl was just 25 years younger than Diddy, according to Jane, and that this was an adult woman. They had to kind of verify that for the jury. But Jane was saying, well, this girl can't even buy her own drinks, when Diddy and this other woman first started talking. And Jane explained that she pushed Diddy's head onto a counter when he was bending over as he looked like he was about to tie his shoes. And she said, well, I just, as far as how hard she pushed his head down, she said, well, I gave it a good shot. And so then Jane is saying that she threw candles and glass everywhere and telling Diddy, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And that wax got onto Diddy, and while she was throwing those candles at him, and that Diddy got angry. He was calling her crazy. And then Jane said she tried to leave the kitchen to go to the primary bedroom, or the master bedroom as she calls it, and that she was telling Diddy just to leave. Jane ended up locking the bedroom door. He kicked that open. She locked herself in the primary bathroom. He kicked that open off the hinges. Jane said she went into her walk-in closet. He kicked that door down too. So Jane went into the hallway, about to leave out of the front door. But while she was in that closet, Jesse, she explained that she changed clothes. But I think an interesting point where she said she changed clothes was she said that she put on like a kind of a baggy dress and some heels on. And she said that while she was back in the hallway trying to leave out of the front door, that Diddy ended up kicking her and then put her in a chokehold. And she said, I couldn't breathe. I was on my tippy toes. And that she ended up kind of squirming her way out of his grip. And she said, I just wanted to run and get away from him. And so she ended up hiding behind this wall 6 blocks away from her house, barefoot. Because remember, as I said, she was in heels for a little bit, and she said that she was just barefoot in a dress, and she said, I just needed myself. I needed to get away. So she didn't even have a phone on her when she had left. She didn't have her ID on her. She had nothing on her but her person, according to her testimony. And she said she hid for about 2 hours, or what felt like 2 hours to her. And she said when she turned the corner to head back towards her apartment, she said, I saw Sean walking toward me. And Jane said that she went into the guest bedroom of her home. Diddy kicked that door in too. She kept throwing glasses and candles at him, and that Jane and Diddy both ended up on the patio. And she says, I just remember that I punched him and he punched me, but Diddy had no injuries. Jane was explaining that she just kind of curled up into a ball at this point while she's outside on the patio on the ground. And she said that Diddy ended up punching her in the head more than once, and that she was just trying to cover her head as far as why she was balled up kind of in the grassy area, and that Diddy punched her and he kicked her multiple times. And Diddy said something along the lines to Jane that she had testified to. He said, that you're trying to take me away from my family. And then Diddy grabbed Jane by her arm and her hair and dragged her back into the house. And Jane said that she called the woman that Diddy was last on this, I guess, Utah trip with, using Diddy's phone during this kind of argument, during this violent encounter. And Jane was explaining that she was just angry and she was fuming, and that during this phone call, Diddy held her down as the other woman just said like very insulting things to her. And Jane had told this woman, shut up, he's beating my behind. And Diddy had FaceTimed Jonathan, the assistant, afterwards and said, well, tell this girl I wasn't with no girl on this family trip. And that's what Diddy had allegedly told Jonathan, the assistant. And so Jane said that she had 2 golf ball sized knots on her forehead. She had a black eye that was starting to form, and that she went into the shower afterwards, and that Diddy kept smacking her while in the shower. He was fully clothed, however she was not. And Jane ended up calling him a bitch. And so even after this, you would think that would kind of be the end, that the two would maybe go their separate ways that night. But she had explained that even after this, that Diddy just told her to put ice on it and put an outfit on. And that outfit, she thought it meant lingerie and high heels, and that's what she did. And even after the assault, Diddy used her phone to play pornography. And then they texted an escort named Anton using Jane's phone, and Diddy had texted Anton using Jane's phone saying, hey, what are you doing? And then Diddy scrolled up and saw earlier messages from Anton about this mutual friend and this Vegas trip where they had. And then Jane was explaining, well, next thing I know, I had to go to my car door to open the gate for Anton, because I guess the clicker for the gate was inside her car. And the jury is shown a photo of Anton's contact number and Jane's phone. Jane says that Diddy told her, we aren't going to end the night like this. And so she ended up covering her bruises and the knots on her forehead, the knots with her hair and the bruises with makeup. And it's interesting because that's kind of similar to what Cassia testified to, as far as just what she did to cover up the injuries that she sustained too during her relationship with Diddy. But then Anton ends up arriving to Jane's apartment. Then Jane and Diddy went to another room. Diddy confronted Jane about these messages between herself and Anton, as far as this mutual friend, which was an unnamed rapper, and that Diddy accused Jane of cheating on him and all this other stuff. But ultimately what ended up happening is that she just took an ecstasy pill and she ended up performing oral sex on the entertainer named Anton. And she said it felt like forever, that she felt like she wasn't in her own body when she was doing this, and she felt disgusted and terrible, and that Jane didn't even tell Anton about the earlier violence, but he ended up leaving. And then she and Diddy kind of continued. He was accusing her of cheating, all this stuff. And that what ended up happening was that Jane was given money to pay for Anton, but also money to fix her doors, and that $3,000 or $4,000 went to Anton in an Uber, which is something that I guess you can do. You can send packages of money in an Uber to an entertainer, and that's what she ended up doing. And then she kept kind of the remainder of that, and it was supposed to go to fixing the doors on her apartment after they broke, but what ended up happening is she used it for other funds too. And so that was really just kind of the big gist of what had happened on June 18th of just last year. This happened very recently, if you put it into context, just a year ago.
And there were...
Wow. All I can say is wow. The prosecutor made us wait for that quite shocking, to be fair, day on June 18, 2024, between Jane and Diddy, where clearly there was, well, I wouldn't say mutual fray, I would say more alleged battery on the part of Diddy to Jane. And it is, yeah, it is. No wonder she was there for a couple of days. It was waited. We all waited for this one day, in which the whole thing about the Cassie incident came to fore. We waited for this one day where Diddy had a domestic dispute and was a and had an incident of domestic violence with Jane herself. It seems that Diddy had a very very bad day on this at this instance. I think the fact of his prosecution by I think they were. I don't know if the prosecutor had presented had started their lawsuit of Diddy at this point in time. But again, I think Diddy was in hot water at this point in time. I think he knew that there was a case to be formed against him. I think that the raid on his residence in on Star Island in Miami and in LA had already happened, and Diddy knew that there was going to be a prosecution of himself. So again, it's I think everything came to the fore, and he took it out on Jane, unfortunately, and we are where we are now. So to say that she is in his corner now would be well, an understatement. Well, would be a lie, would be a literal lie, and it is really it is really unfortunate that Diddy is put into these circumstances. But again, he still at that time participated in freak offs with with the guys of the world staring upon him. With the eyes of the world staring upon him, sorry, not the guys, the eyes. With the eyes of the world staring upon him, he still participated in the freak off. He still was trying to pay his paramour Jane money for damaged property. He still was trying to, well, be him. Unfortunately, allegedly, and this is damning. This is very very damning, according to Diddy. You'd think that he would turn over a new leaf, especially with all that was happening to him at the time, but he did not. He was clearly addicted to the lifestyle that he created for himself, and he did it again. And this is not, Jane has turned herself from uh, I mean, there are still a few holes in her argument, but she definitely gained points back in terms of her credibility with this evidence that it was revealed here. Jane is indeed. It took a while for her to bring out this evidence, but it finally is here, and it was well worth the wait, because now we're seeing Diddy as indeed this quote unquote monster that everybody's alleging here. But again, there are still a few holes in her testimony, that's to be sure, and I'm sure the defense will try to exploit those things. However, Diddy has a lot to answer for, and Jane has moved from a discreditable witness to a credible one. Remains to see what the what the defense will do when it comes to cross examination. But that is seriously damning stuff. To be fair, let's continue.
Were photos of these broken doors that were shown to the jury?
Yep, there were a lot of photos shown to the jury. So they saw the package money being sent to Anton on June 19th of 2024. Then they saw the Uber because she was trying to take a picture of the license plate. And then they did see an email from Jane to this company to repair the doors. Those were from August 27th of 2024. And in that email were the attachments of the various different kind of photos of just all the different doors that were broken or taken off their hinges or destroyed, pretty much, that, according to her, still haven't been fixed even to this day.
Yeah, this is, again, a complicated situation, because I understand the testimony to be, she claimed, Combs said to her basically along the lines of, take this bleeping pill, you're not going to ruin my bleeping night, go out there and bleep, bleep, and claims, she said to him, I didn't want to do it. She ends up doing it. You could argue that seems to be more the clearer cut case of potential sex trafficking, but it's complicated by the fact she said, a few days later, she missed him, right? She missed him. And it goes to those complicated avenues of what is that relationship between, again, just taking the allegations as true, an abuser and a victim, which I understand there was even discussion today about whether Dr. Dawn Hughes, a forensic psychologist who testified earlier in the trial, whether or not she'll have to be recalled to maybe explain some of this. Elizabeth.
Again, it speaks to the trauma bond. That's what he's talking about, Dawn Hughes, the clinical psychologist, and that was brought on that it brought on to explain the mental distress that Cassie was going through while with Diddy, saying that they had a trauma bond. The reason why she stayed with him so long was because, it was sort of fight or flight emotion that she had with Diddy, and she only wanted to protect him, even though she was indeed victimized and abused by Diddy in and of itself, and participating in these freak offs. So again, I think they're trying to bring to the fore that this trauma bond existed with Jane in this instance, because again, she, as he said, she still uh, expressed feelings for Diddy. She still wanted to be in Diddy's life. She still wanted to be in Diddy's company. Days after this alleged SA and coercion in SA, which is quite damning. In this instance, yes, uh, some coercion can be used and can be seen as a predicate offense in RICO in this instance, along with the trafficking, sex trafficking over borders, and the drug trafficking. It's yeah, it's seriously bad news for Diddy in this instance. You'd think that Janie was, but there's still holes to be had here, and I'm sure defense will try to win points back, and it will be seen if that is indeed the case today. But we're gonna end it there, ladies and gentlemen. It's over. It's after 12 o'clock. We're moving into the near 2 hour mark. So tomorrow we're gonna revise what happened today in the Diddy trial, and also get to the bottom of things with regards to what all these 30 witnesses are trying to amount to a RICO charge for Diddy. So we're going to follow on with that tomorrow. So do stay with me here on Talk Talk Live with regards to that. But we're gonna end up with things here. But let me hear what finally had to be said here on Law and Crime. Thanks very much to Law and Crime for doing these for covering this trial so well, doing wonderful things in YouTube streets. And again, it is my second go-to outside of TMZ. Yeah, they're doing a wonderful job with here with Jesse et al. Here, Jesse Weber et al. In terms of the coverage of this trial here. But let's hear what finally had to be said by Law and Crime.
Before we wrap things up, how did their relationship end? When was the last time that she saw him? And I understand we learned a little bit about more her connection to this case and what brought her to testify.
Yeah, so I was kind of waiting to hear from the prosecution that she was the woman that was in the hotel whenever Diddy got arrested, but we never got to that point because the last time she saw Diddy in person was in August of 2024, and that Diddy had told her to invite Dawn over for a hotel night. So even as late as August of 2024, she was still doing these hotel nights or wild debauchery nights. And so the jury is shown an exhibit, this being from September 9th of 2024, is a text between Diddy and Jane, and Jane said, well, whoever you're with can do it. And she was talking about Diddy asking her to send a sexually explicit video. And remember how I was saying around this time when Diddy had made his trip back to New York, whenever he was over in his hotel before he got arrested, that HSI saw like women's bags inside his hotel room. And so Jane was kind of saying, well, whoever you're with inside wherever you are here in New York, that you can get that sexually explicit video from her. But I thought what was interesting is that, so Diddy is arrested in September of 2024. Jane was subpoenaed in November of 2024, but she said she never spoke with prosecutors even before that. So from November of 2024 until January of 2025, she didn't have any other meetings with them. Jane was explaining that she had been in therapy for the last 3 months, and that Diddy still pays for her rent and even the current lawyer that she has. And so Jane was explaining that she did have meetings with Diddy's attorneys. And I thought what was interesting is that she told the defense attorneys first about what had happened on June 18th of 2024 before even telling prosecutors about this incident. And so she said she didn't even reveal this anything about this violent incident until April of 2025, so just a couple months ago. And she said that she was still processing that night. And so Jane said that at first she felt obligated to meet with Diddy's attorneys based on her relationship with him. And honestly, from what I could feel while she was on the witness stand, I felt like she felt possibly, and I'm presuming this or assuming this, that she seems like she's still in love with him in some type of aspect. And I think that's something maybe the defense will really point out when they cross-examine her tomorrow. But she was even asked in the final line of questioning, how do you feel about Diddy? Something that other people have testified to as well, including Cassie. But as far as Jane is concerned, Jane said that she prays for his continued healing and for peace for him. And she didn't say as far as I still love him, I miss him. She didn't say any of that. And I thought at this particular moment where she said that I pray for his continued healing and peace for him, that she would turn and look at him or just look at him in the eye or just something. And we never saw that from what I could see of Jane, even while she was testifying. For the most part today, she kept her head down, rarely even looked at AUSA Maureen Comey when she was asking her questions. And so I thought for that moment, okay, maybe she might look at him directly. Maybe there would be some type of look, and we didn't see that at all. She really just kind of kept her head down, even just saying that.
That time frame is interesting because it explains the superseding indictment. It explains why she was added and how she was added and when she was added to it. But it almost feels like not a reluctant witness, but not a typical victim in a sex trafficking case who would testify and talk about the torment of your abusers and what it was like. You know, I say a classic example would be somebody who was kidnapped by this like organization and sex traffic, was and shipped off to different clients and maybe was rescued by authorities and now testifying against the perpetrator of the sex trafficking ring. You're not getting that. Doesn't mean that they're not hitting points for the prosecution, but you wonder how beneficial this witness was for the prosecution's case. Sex trafficking, maybe not. Transportation to engage in prostitution, I think she definitely helped support that, literally paying, transporting sex workers and herself for prostitution purposes across different cities. Probably that supports it. But I will be very curious to see where the cross-examination goes for sure. Elizabeth.
We'll leave it there. Thank you to Elizabeth Miller and Jesse Weber there. But just to sum up, yeah, indeed, I think Jane is one of the few witnesses on the part of the prosecution who didn't wish ill for Diddy. Still loved Diddy. Still had feelings for Diddy. And again, she was, I think, subpoenaed for the prosecution, and if it was up to her, I don't think she would have testified on behalf of Diddy, because I think she still has feelings for him. She still has love for him, even though there was abuse on many parts, and also after all those freak offs and the lack of a relationship. She clearly was still supported by Diddy, still receives rent by Diddy, and so she's clearly enamored, clearly attached to Diddy in many ways, shape, or form. And again, that's all that needs to be said. So is she the most credible of witnesses for the prosecution? Indeed not, because I think that there will be holes punched in her testimony with regards to her consent with all these freak-offs. I think she still would participate with Diddy and freak-offs to this day if given the opportunity, allegedly. But again, a lot of her testimony was damning, especially that June 18th, 2024 incident where, the abuse really happened and the coercion actually happened. But thank you very much for joining me here at Talk Live on IG and YouTube. We're going to end it here, ladies and gentlemen. As for the Diddy update of trial, we are going to be back tomorrow to talk about what happened today and also what happened tomorrow. Hopefully the TMZ updates will be there, and also how we form a Diddy case, a RICO case. So that'll be back tomorrow. But there's still a lot to go through on Talk Live here. I've got many a topic with which we will continue to discuss, and do check out for my promos on IG and YouTube, and also on Instagram and on TikTok, just to let you know what things are going on here. But thank you very much for joining here on Talk Live. It was a rather lengthy one. We had to get through a few days, but it was basically Jane for the last few days, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I mean, some days, some things were good, some things were bad, but again, she was quite the revealing witness, and a lot of exculpatory uh, uh, testimony she gave on behalf of the prosecution. But again, the defense, I'm sure, is going to prosecute as of today, and I believe I've had a sneak preview, and I think the defense will have their day as of today. So we'll preview that tomorrow, and also what happened on tomorrow's proceedings as well. So do stay tuned for Talk Live, but we're going to end it here. Thank you very much for joining me here, and we're going to say good night.